class. Moving on to the what Jacobean tragedy is. I will not be going into what tragedy itself is like, or tragedy during the time Shakespeare writing is, because we had already covered this in the last semester. We don't have so much time to go back to it. So I just want to tell you what Jacobean tragedy is. Just keep in mind that what we had talked about tragedy in the previous class pretty much applies to this play as well. Now, Jacobean tragedies are essentially tragedies which were performed and written during the reign, or when during the ruling of King James I of England. Okay, so King James was ruling from 1603 to 1625. And during this period, it was called the Jacobean era, and therefore the tragedies which were written during this era were called the Jacobean tragedy. By the time James came into throne, like when he became the king, tragedy was already a very established form. Like, it was a very popular form of entertainment. It was a very popular form of, let's say, socializing. And tragedy, if you remember, was not only accessible to the rich; it was also accessible to the poor. So there were, and like in the theater, there were seats which were very, very cheap, which were for the poor. There were expensive seats for the rich, and so on and so forth. So it was a very mass sort of a way of participation in something entertainment. It was also mass entertainment, let's put it this way. Now, during the Elizabethan time, there were a lot of comedies, like, and then there were, and comedies, again, I will not explain what comedies are, but usually they have a happy ending, they end in a marriage, and so on and so forth. During Elizabeth's reign, we usually had, more so the inclination was towards comedies, but we also had tragedies. For example, it would be Christopher Marlowe's Dr. Faustus. Now, during, like, as the plays progressed, the quality of the plays, or the style of the plays, and the content of the plays, they improved over the years. Okay, also over the years, and the taste of the people who would go to the plays became more nuanced, became more improved, or you can say they also changed. You can't say they improved or not, but you can say they changed. So the idea became that they wanted to see human emotions played out in its extremes. Okay, so it would be about, somebody who is extremely ambitious, as is the case of Macbeth, and how that is sort of portrayed to an extreme level, would show an extreme ambition. So human emotions, human desires, human faults would be sort of portrayed in a very extreme, exaggerated level. Okay. Shakespeare during the Elizabethan time was mostly writing comedies, and his maturation, his evolvement as a writer sort of emerged when he started writing tragedies, and this he did mostly during the Jacobean period. Okay, and how did he do it? It was done in terms of plot, and it was also done in terms of characterization. Now, when I talk about plot and characterization, again, remember what we had studied about the concept of tragedy, and how we talked about how there are 7 main elements in a play, not just tragedy, and one of the 2 main elements are the characters and the plot. Okay, so Shakespeare focused on these 2 aspects to sort of give color, to give life to his tragedy, to his tragedies. So continuing on Jacobean tragedy, revenge tragedies are what were very popular during this Jacobean period. For one of the examples would be The Duchess of Malfi by John Webster, and it was written during 1612 to 1630. The idea of revenge tragedy would be something that the main character thinks that he has been wronged in some way or the other, and now it's not really, it could be that that nothing has been done to him, that he only thinks that something has been done. It could be that yes, something has actually been done to him, or it could be that he thinks something wrong has been done to him, and therefore he seeks revenge. And in the process of seeking revenge, it leads to fatal consequences for the tragic hero. Okay, and also for some of the good characters who might die. And when good characters die, they're called tragic waste. I'm just giving you this information. It is not important for you to remember this, but just some extra information. Keep in mind that Macbeth is not a revenge tragedy. If anybody is familiar with Othello, Othello is a revenge tragedy because Othello thinks that his wife is cheating on him and therefore he wants to take revenge and therefore he kills his wife and so on and so forth. But Macbeth essentially is not a revenge tragedy. This is important to keep in mind because at the time Shakespeare was writing, revenge tragedies were extremely popular. He himself had written revenge tragedies. Now, uh, Jacobean plays are particularly extremely violent. Like there would be a lot of fighting, there would be a lot of deaths. They're cynical, they're pessimistic, meaning that it does not give a very flowery, a very positive view of the world. And it ultimately shows the corruption in society. And by corruption in society means like how people are corrupt in the sense that they can be greedy, they can be they have no problem stepping over somebody else to gain what they want. Basically, it's not a society where there's harmony and where there's peace. It's very violent, it's a very degenerative society. Okay. uh, and so following that, I have mentioned that Jacobean plays are basically grim satires of contemporary society, meaning that if you understand what satire is, meaning that it is sort of a criticism of the evils of the bad aspects of the society in which Shakespeare is writing. Okay, so when I say contemporary, I obviously don't mean today's society, I mean the society in which these plays are set in. Jacobean tragedy is also known as tragedy of blood. Why? Very simply, because usually in Jacobean tragedies, you see a lot of deaths and a lot of killings, a lot of war, and a lot of fighting, and a lot of people die. There's a lot of blood on the stage. So it's also called a tragedy of blood. Now, some examples of Jacobean tragedy would be King Lear, again, William Shakespeare, the Changeling, Thomas Middleton, The White Devil, John Webster. There are, of course, many, many other playwrights who were writing tragedies at this point. Again, you don't need to know about it. So these are just some ideas, some other playwrights who were very significant during the same time. In Jacobean tragedy, very similar to just what we understood as tragedy previously, is that there is a tragic hero. The tragic hero is usually a man of a noble birth, okay, and he has Hermotia, which is tragic flow, and tragic flaw, not flow. Please excuse me. He has tragic flaw, which basically means that he has some kind of a fault. And now this fault doesn't necessarily make him an out and out evil character. It just means that he has a deficiency in his character. Okay, basically a flaw, as it says. And he also has hubris, which means pride, that he's extremely overconfident in himself. And all of this together ultimately leads to his downfall. And and this is precisely the reason why the tragic hero is of noble birth, of high birth, because his downfall is only impactful if he belongs to a person of a high birth. Okay, like, so let's say something bad happens to something poor. Yes, it is sad, but it is not as impactful, at least for Shakespeare or the audience of Shakespeare, if something bad happens to somebody who is, at a high authoritative position, let it be a king or a general in the army and so on and so forth. Okay, now, this is a character map. Now, I just want to, you can just sort of come back and look at it, because right now it really would not make any sense, because I will give you an extensive summary of the play. And I am going to do it because it's important that you understand, that you know the play really well, so that you understand what are the topics that are important in the play. Okay, now this character map, I've just put it here just very quickly. Macbeth, of course, is the main character, and he is a Thane. Okay, like when you see him in the beginning of the play, he's a Thane. A Thane is basically a person who is a noble. So it is like a duke or a lord or an earl, but they're not the same position as the king. Let's say they're the king's noblemen. So they come like one rank after the king, okay? And like, so the king rules, let's say, one entire territory, right? And then there are all these smaller territories under that territory. These territories are divided, and then there are sub-rulers, which would be the Thane. Okay, so Macbeth in the beginning of the play is a Thane, And and we see that there are other characters. So Duncan is currently the king of Scotland. This play is set in Scotland. Do not confuse Scotland with England. Do not say in your, open book exam that this play is set in the United Kingdom. That is not technically right. You have to be precise and say that it is Scotland. Um, he is and then in the what happens is we start with the war going on, and for now just remember that Duncan is the king of Scotland. Macbeth is one of the thanes in Scotland, and Lady Macbeth is his wife. I will introduce you the other characters as we talk about the play itself, as I give you the summary of the play. Now, very typical to all the tragedies or even all the comedies, usually plays have 5 acts. Yeah, and these acts are sort of divided into scenes. Now, usually acts have like maybe between 3 to 5 scenes, but in this play there are some acts which have even 7 scenes. Okay. um so just keep this in mind. And before I start giving you the summary, there is a Bollywood adaptation of this play. It's called Makbul. You can watch it, but I would suggest that don't just don't watch Makbul and think that is it, because of course Makbul has been sort of adapted into an Indian context and in our contemporary times. So it's sort of important that you understand uh, the story here first, and then if you're interested, you can sort of connect some of the themes that you see in the play with the themes that come off in Makbul. Okay, if you want to do it, that's not just a suggestion, right? So the play starts, and it has a very a very cinematic, or rather a very dramatic effect, that the play starts and there's thunderstorm, and it's all dark, and then these 3 very creepy looking women, they're witches, they come on the stage, and they say that they must speak to Macbeth, and it's all very confusing, like who are these 3 witches, what are they doing, but they all just come on the stage and they say that we need to talk to Macbeth. We have some predictions to make. Okay, and it is very typical, like the very normative idea of witches. Like they have a big cauldron, and they look into the cauldron, and there's like green liquid bubbling, and they put like things in it, and then they make predictions. It's pretty much that kind of a scene. Okay, so what is happening? Next scene is that Scotland is at war, and Macbeth is basically a soldier. Well, he's a thane also, but he's also a very noble and a brave soldier. So King Duncan, basically, he receives 3 reports. One report is that one of the rebels in the war against King Duncan, MacDonald, has been killed by the brave Macbeth. Okay, and this war is taking place against the Norwegians, against people from Norway. So King Duncan also is also told that Norway has finally surrendered because Macbeth was a very brave soldier, and then he's also told that one of the thanes, Thane of Cador, had switched sides. So he betrayed King Duncan and moved over the sides to the side of the Norwegians. So in the next scene, basically what happens is the war is over, and Macbeth, along with another soldier called Banquo, they are riding back to the palace from the battlefield. And they are sort of stopped on the way, and these 3 sisters, these 3 witches, they suddenly appear, okay, and they make 3 prophecies. All right. The first prophecy is that Macbeth will be named the Thane of Cador. Okay. Now keep this in mind that Macbeth is already a thane of another place, but he also gets named Thane of Cador. So don't confuse that he becomes thane now. He's already a thane, but but the witches say that he would also be named the Thane of Cador. Why? Because, as I just said in the beginning, the Thane of Cador had betrayed King Duncan, and so he was eventually executed. Now, and then he says that he would then be king, that Macbeth would become king. The witches say that he would first become the Thane of Cawdor, then he would become king. But they say something interesting. They say that Macbeth's children will not be the one ruling Scotland. It would be the children of Banquo. Okay, and they say this, and because they are witches, they have supernatural powers, they suddenly vanish into the thin air. So just imagine this. This makes for really beautiful, very, very, very mesmerizing, dramatic performance on stage. Okay. Then we see these two characters arrive called Ross and Angus. You don't have to remember them, but they just sort of, they're like extra characters. They arrive and they tell Macbeth and Banquo that, oh, King Duncan has named you the Thane of Cawdor. So already one of the prophecies of the witches have already come true. Right. Now we are moving on to, we're still on Act 1, we're moving on to scene 4 to 7. In this scene, we are in the palace of King Duncan, and Macbeth and Banquo are, the king says, thank you for your service, so on and so forth, formalities basically. And then Duncan basically announces that his successor, that who would be king after him, would be his son Malcolm. Okay. Now Macbeth is not really happy about this because he thinks that he should be the king because he's the best Thane, he's the most powerful soldier. But what the king does is by naming his son to be the next king, he's basically following the law of primogeniture. I have written this at the bottom in the notes. You can probably see it. It basically means that. The law of primogeniture means that if you are the eldest son of a king, then you automatically become the king. Okay, and then your eldest son will become the king, so on and so forth. This is the law of primogeniture, which means that the title of the king will always remain within the family. Okay, now we sort of the scene moves, and we see the castle of Inverness, which is where Macbeth lives. Okay, and we see Lady Macbeth. Now Lady Macbeth just means his wife. She doesn't really have like a particular name. She is just sort of referred to as Lady Macbeth. All right. Now Lady Macbeth, we see her reading she's alone on stage, okay, and we see her reading a letter which she has received from her husband, and where he's telling her in the letter about the prophecy of the three witches. Now, when Lady Macbeth hears this, she says that, oh, okay, we must do something about making Macbeth the king, because the witches have already, prophesied. By prophesied, I mean that already bhavishya dekh liya, okay? So they've already prophesied this is going to happen. So she decides to make a plan to kill Duncan, okay? To kill King Duncan. Now, so King Duncan and his retinue means like all his servants and maids and soldiers, they arrive at Inverness, and Lady Macbeth plays a very typical, a very perfect role of very good role of being the perfect hostess. So this sort of touches upon the idea of appearance versus reality, which basically means that what you see is not what it is. And this is a very prominent idea that sort of keeps coming in over and over in Jacobean tragedies, where characters pretend to be what they are not. This is something you see with the character of Iago in Othello as well. Lady Macbeth is pretty much pretending to be a very good wife and a very good, a hostess to the king. She's very subservient, very showing great hospitality, and so on and so forth. And so just keep that in mind, that we do come across this idea of appearance versus reality a lot in terms of how characters portray themselves when they're actually not like that. And also in terms of the situation, where the situation might look like something to the characters on the stage, but you as the audience know that the situation is completely different. Okay. Now, now Macbeth, his wife tells him that we should kill King Duncan. And Macbeth at this time, remember he's a tragic hero, so he's not evil. Okay, so even though he is tempted by ambition, he still has some doubts that can I kill the king? Should I kill the king? What will happen? I will get damned to hell, and he will of course lose his reputation amongst all the other thanes. So but what his wife does is, his wife sort of starts taunting him, sort of starts making fun of him, saying that, oh, you're not man enough, you're not man enough to kill King Duncan. Oh, I understand, you don't have the guts, you don't have the guts to do it. So she sort of like instigates his masculinity, she makes fun of his masculinity. And the whole idea of male ego, that just to prove that how masculine, how machismo, and just to show machismo, he agrees. Okay, he's like, okay, I will do it. He's edged by his wife to do it. Okay. Now, moving on, we will come to Act 2, Scene 1 and 2. Now, this is basically the killing of the scene, where, sorry, the scene of the killing. What happens is Macbeth makes way to the king's chamber, and suddenly he meets Banquo, and it's sort of a interruption, and Banquo starts talking about, I don't, I have been having really bad dreams about the witches, blah blah blah. So he's sort of like interrupting Banquo, and Macbeth is thinking, okay, fine, just talk and leave. I have to go kill the king. So finally, when Macbeth is alone, he has this like, he has a vision. He has this like very surreal, a very supernatural experience, where he sees like a ghostly dagger, like a dagger floating in the air, and the dagger sort of points to him, to the king's chamber. Okay. And he thinks that this is a sign. This is a sign for me to go kill the king. Mhm. So the Lady Macbeth, she goes and she drugs the guards of the king, so that Macbeth can enter. And then Macbeth goes, and then he kills the king. But even after the killing, he is very disturbed. Like, he understands that he's committed regicide. Regicide, I will just type it here quickly in the notes. Regicide basically means killing a king. Okay, so he has committed regicide, and of course he's very anxious that he has killed the king, and so on and so forth. And once again his wife sort of mocks him, saying that, oh my god, you have no strength of character, you cannot be firm in anything. And because Macbeth was so nervous when he was killing the king, he accidentally sort of brings the dagger, like, with himself. And um, and so Lady Macbeth tries to clean up the mess which Macbeth has created. So she cleans the dagger, she puts the dagger back in the bedchamber, and and she sort of covers the drugged servants with the blood of the king, so that it looks like the servants have killed the king. Okay. Now, and by servants I mean the guards who are standing in front of the bedchamber of the king. Now, Lennox and Macduff, these two characters, you don't have to focus on Lennox so much, but Macduff is a very important character. He will come up in the end. They are both basically another Thanes. They're sort of the part of the retinue of the king, and they have been basically told that, okay, go wake up the king, and we have to leave now. We have to go back to the main palace. So they all go, and they suddenly, of course, they discover that the king is dead. Okay, or is killed. And Macbeth here is extremely anxious. He's acting very suspicious. So, in order to draw attention from Macbeth, Lady Macbeth pretends to faint. Hmm? And of course, but everybody there sort of realized that Macbeth must have killed the king, and they decide that this is an act of treason. Act of treason basically means that you do something that goes against the loyal, that is disloyal to your king. Okay, and here he has actually killed the king, so it is an act of treason. Okay, now, on his way to the castle, Thane of Ross, another multiple Thanes in the play. Okay, so Macduff is a Thane, Lennox is a Thane, and Thane of Ross encounters an old man who confirms the widespread report of disruption in the natural world. Now, this might seem to be a little like, why is that scene there? Kya ho raha hai scene ka? Like, why is it there? Now, we will touch upon the idea of nature, nature reflecting the corruption in the human society. This is a theme, that nature reflects the corruption in human society. And so when he says that there's widespread disruption in the natural world, it basically mirrors the disruption which is happening in the social world. Okay. And the old man, you can interpret it as God, you can interpret it as a messenger of God. Remember, there was an old man character even in Dr. Foster's. So just keep this in mind. We will come, I have put it in bold so that you understand that this is an important theme in the play. So that's why I have put it in bold. So don't think it's out of nowhere. Now, now Macbeth appears. Now Macduff appears with fresh news that Duncan has been buried, and that his sons have fled, that they have run away from Scotland. So one of his sons, he goes to England, the other one goes to Ireland, and the kinship, and Macbeth has become the king. Okay, and so by Act 2, the first two prophecies of the witch have come true. Okay. Now, Macbeth realizes that, okay, the first two prophecies have come true. We are moving on to Act 3 now. And what is happening in Act 3 is Macbeth thinks, I have made sure that the first two prophecies have come true. Now I need to make sure that the third prophecy, if you remember what the third prophecy is, the third prophecy was basically about Macbeth's children never becoming future kings of Scotland. It was Banquo's children who would be the future king of Scotland, right? So what is happening here is he says, okay, I need to just make sure that this prophecy does not come true. So what he does, he hires two murderers and he tells them, go and kill Banquo and his son Fleance. Okay. Now, the hired murderers, they make their way towards Banquo, and Macbeth tells his wife that he has made this plot. Okay, that he has made this plot to kill Banquo and his son. And at this point, his wife is really surprised because up until this point, okay, keep in mind this is Act 3, so we've already reached the middle of the play. His wife is very surprised that how did Macbeth do this without telling her? Because in the beginning we see a relationship where they tell each other, like where they confide in each other. There are no secrets. They are completely honest with each other. But here we see that he hasn't told his wife, and his wife is very surprised that how did Banquo make this decision? Sorry, how did Macbeth make this decision? Okay. And he tells his wife, and meanwhile, what happens is the hired murderers, they go and try to kill Banquo and his son, but they are only able to kill Banquo, and Fleance sort of escapes. Okay. While this is going on, Macbeth and his wife, they decide to throw a banquet. A banquet basically means a party, okay? And they want to throw a banquet for all the other thanes in Scotland because they want to gain their loyalty, because they already know that these thanes think that Macbeth has killed King Duncan. So they are having this party, and the murderers arrive, and they tell Macbeth that, okay, we have killed Banquo, but his son has escaped. Now, he is very this makes Macbeth very nervous. He's extremely anxious. He starts to hallucinate, and he starts to see the ghost of Banquo. Okay. And because when he sees his ghost, he's scared. He's filled with guilt. He's filled with despair for killing his supposed friend, and at the same time he's filled with courage. He's filled with more desire. He's filled with more ambition to ensure that not only is he the king of Scotland, but that nobody else can take away this position from him. Okay. And here Lady Macbeth, she sees the conflict going on between her husband's head, that he is feeling, that he's sort of oscillating between feeling extremely ambitious, and at the same time he's feeling despair. So his wife sort of tries to console him. Now, because there is a party going on and she does not want other things to see this, this mental disrupture of Macbeth, she she tries to like sort of like take the attention away from Macbeth. So she plays basically a role of a pretty good wife even until now, even though Macbeth is not really confiding in her anymore and not treating her with the same level of confidentiality as he did before. Okay, now Macbeth is just so paranoid right now that he, even though on one hand he is extremely regretful for killing Banquo, that he is despairing about it. On the other hand, he is already making plans to kill Macduff. Okay, why is he making plans to kill Macduff? Macduff is another Thane, and he's making plans to kill Macduff because um, because he thinks that after Macbeth, Macduff would be the next king of Scotland. Okay, so he just wants to make sure that all the other possibilities, all the other men who could possibly be the king of Scotland are all killed. Okay, so and just to make sure how to proceed further, he decides to go visit the Weird Sisters again. The Weird Sisters are basically the name given to the three witches who you saw in Act 1, okay, who made the prophecies. Now, there is scene 6 is actually a very random scene. Like there's suddenly this goddess appears. She is the goddess called Hecate, and she is the goddess of magic. She's the goddess of night. She's the goddess of necromancy. She's the goddess of ghosts and witchcraft, and she suddenly shows up in front of the Weird Sisters. Okay, and she says that so far I have not really done anything actively, but now I will make sure that Macbeth's downfall is confirmed. Okay, this is a very uh, random scene. There are arguments that this scene should not be in the play, that Shakespeare didn't even write it; it was added later. And usually, the scene is played by the same character who plays Lady Macbeth. Now, do keep this in mind that I will also talk about it later in the class. That Lady Macbeth is usually like that there's arguments that she is called the fourth witch. Okay, she is called the fourth witch, and some people argue, like one of the arguments that come up is that she is called the fourth witch because it's the same character, same actor who plays both Lady Macbeth and this character of Hecate. Now, this is not a very good line of reasoning. This is not a very good line of argument, because during Shakespeare's time, many actors would play roles of several minor characters. It is quite common, and it is also possible that one main actor who is playing, let's say a lead character, could also be playing some minor characters in between. And basically, if their costume is changed and if their makeup is changed, the audience automatically understands that this is not really the same character. Okay, so yes, we will talk about why Lady Macbeth is also seen as a witch, but do not connect the fact that the actress or the actor who plays Lady Macbeth also plays Hecate, and therefore they are witch. That is, do not make that connection. Okay, now this is scene 4, act 4, scene 1. This is one of the, again, a very important scene, because we are again seeing the Weird Sisters. He goes back to the Weird Sisters, and now he just demands, he says, okay, show me my future, what is going to happen next. And the Weird Sisters sort of, they summon these, like, these very scary apparitions. Imagine them like, holographic images, just like ghostly holographic images coming up. Okay, and they pull up, they show him four apparitions, and they all mean something or the other. First, you see a floating head, like just a head floating in the air, and 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 they say this means that you need to be careful of Macduff. Okay, the second, we see a blood covered child, and a child completely covered in blood, and he comes and tells that he cannot be killed by a man who's born of a woman. Okay, now the thing is that he thinks that, oh, okay, that means I cannot be killed by anybody because all men are born out of women, right? Women give birth, no, men don't give birth. So he thinks, okay, that means I cannot win. And then the third image is of a crowned child, like a child wearing a crown, and he's holding like a tree branch, a small tree, and he says that Macbeth is safe unless Birnam Wood moves to Dunsinane Hill. Now, Dunsinane Hill is where Macbeth lives, and Birham Wood are the forests around the castle where he lives in. Okay. Now, the child comes and says, unless the wood moves near Dunsinane Hill, Macbeth cannot be hurt. Now, again, Macbeth thinks that, well, obviously, a forest cannot, start moving. Like trees cannot get up and start moving. So I will not. I'm sure, I will not be. I'm invincible. Nothing can happen to me. Okay. Now, finally, in the last apparition, you see a procession of 8 crowned kings walk by. They're all like ghosts of king. And in the end, he sees Banquo. Okay. And Macbeth has no idea what this scene means. And he asks the witches that tell me what it means. But the witches, like, they do some crazy kind of a dance and they go away. Okay. They vanish. Um, and then again, Lennox, again, one of the Thanes. Remember, Lennox is based. So Lennox and Ross are 2 Thanes, and they keep coming in between as like messengers. Their only purpose is to be a messenger. Okay. And so Lennox enters, and he tells Macbeth that Macduff jo hai, he has run away to England. Okay, remember that Macbeth, that the witches told Macbeth that Macduff, you need to be beware of that. Macduff say, watch your step against Macduff, beware of Macduff. And when Lennox comes and tells Macbeth that Macduff to bhag gaya England, he thinks this is a very good opportunity to go and capture Macduff's castle and also to kill off Macduff's wife and children. Okay. Now, scene 4, scene 2 and 3. This is basically taking place in Macduff's castle because Macduff has now run away to England. He has left his child and his wife there, and a messenger comes and tells him that you need to run away because people are coming to kill you. And suddenly a group of murderers, they enter and they start abusing Macduff, and his little son, who's very brave, he defends his father. And of course the murderers, they stab the boy. And remember how it is a tragedy of blood. So already we are about, you can say, around 60%, 65% into the play, and already so many people have died. So now you see why Jacobean tragedy is called the tragedy of blood. Okay. So the child is killed, and Lady Macbeth, she turns around and she starts to run, and the killers chase him, and they do eventually end up killing her. Now the scene shifts. We suddenly see that we are now in England, and we see Macduff. And here we are told why Macduff has run away from Scotland. Why did he run away? Is he scared of Macbeth? Why did he abandon his wife? Why did he run away to England? And here we find out that he has run away to England to unite with Duncan's son, whose name is Malcolm. Okay, I know all these names sound very similar, so you can see them like put in like red just to like avoid confusion. Yes, so he goes to England to basically give his loyalty, to give his service to Malcolm, who is Duncan's son. And why does he do that? Because Duncan, before he had died, had declared that Malcolm would be king. Now, if you will ask me that why isn't Malcolm king already? Why did suddenly Macbeth become king? That's because, remember, Malcolm and his other brother, they had run away right after the death of Duncan. Okay, so that's why they couldn't be king, and that's why Macbeth became king. So in Act 4, what happens? Macduff arrives in England. He meets Duncan and says that you are the rightful ruler of Scotland. I want you to fight with you. I want you to fight against Macbeth, so that you can take back the crown. You can take back your kingship. Okay. Now, Malcolm just wants to make sure that Macduff is loyal, that he's not lying. So he starts saying that you don't know, what if I am even worse, what if I'm even worse than Macbeth, what if I do even worse things than Macbeth, what will you do, what will you do, where will your loyalties lie? At first Macbeth is very polite, he says no, 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 I don't think you're like that. But suddenly, like, he snaps. He thinks that he snaps and he says, oh, Scotland, Scotland, which basically means that he is really concerned about his country. Like, he starts thinking that, oh my God, even Malcolm is an evil person and Malcolm will ruin Scotland if he becomes king. And so his main concern, his main love, his main loyalty is towards Scotland. And when this is revealed, Malcolm says, okay, it was just a test. I wanted to check your loyalty, not towards me, but I want you to be loyal towards Scotland. I want you to love your land and not love the king. Okay. And you have proven your loyalty. And whatever I was saying to you, that I will be even more evil than Macbeth, I was just testing you. And because my idea is that you should not be loyal to an evil king, you should be loyal to your land. Okay, you should be loyal to your country. And Macduff passes this test because he when he thinks that even Malcolm is evil, he cries out in despair that, oh, Scotland, oh, Scotland, thinking that, oh my God, what will happen to Scotland, what will happen if these people start ruling. Anyway, so they confirm each other's loyalties with each other, and they decide to be a part of the rebel army. Rebel army matlab the army which will fight against Macbeth. Now, uh, then Ross appears. You remember how I just said that Ross and Lennis are the two things जो सिर्फ messenger का काम करते हैं basically. So Ross appears and he tells Macduff that his family has been killed. And of course, Macduff is completely shattered. He's absolutely angry. He's furious. And thus far, he wanted to fight against Macbeth because Macbeth had killed the king, because of his loyalty towards the king, because of his loyalty towards Scotland. But now he also wants to kill Macbeth because Macbeth has hurt his family, has killed his family. So it sort of becomes also something personal. And yes, here the angle of personal revenge comes in. Okay, but be very careful to not associate be very careful to not associate this with the idea of revenge tragedy, which I told you in the beginning. Here, yes, by the end, by the fourth act, Macduff wants to kill Macbeth because Macbeth has killed his family and therefore he wants to take revenge. Yes, that does happen. But this does not make it a revenge tragedy, very simply because for it to be a revenge tragedy, it has to be the tragic hero taking the revenge, not another character. Okay. And also this aspect of Macduff wanting to take revenge is a very minor, well, not a minor, it's a very minor part of the play. Okay, it is not the driving force of the play. Okay, they are not going to fight Macbeth because he has killed Macduff's family. They are going to fight Macbeth because Macbeth has wrongfully taken the title of King of Scotland. Okay, so be careful about this. Like, yes, there is an aspect of revenge in this, but this does not make it a revenge tragedy. Okay, now, why all of this is happening in scene 3 of Act 4, we are given this information. I'm not getting into how this information is received because, like, I don't want to tell you the whole scene. It's not entirely relevant to the actual plot of the play. So right now, Malcolm is staying with the King of England. Okay, and the King of England is called Edward the Confessor, and we are told that besides providing military help, besides providing political support, King of England is also supporting Macduff by healing the sick, by healing the hurt soldiers, by healing people, because he has supernatural powers. I have highlighted this because once again, just like the scene where we talked about the old man coming in and telling Ross that there, like, the nature has become very disruptive. There are bad things happening in nature. There are storms, there are thunderstorms happening. This is also it looks like it doesn't make any sense, but it's sort of an extra information. But this is crucial because another important theme that we will be touching upon would be the importance of the supernatural elements in the play. Of course, the supernatural elements are essentially embodied in the characters of the three weird sisters, the three witches. They're embodied in all these apparitions that Macbeth keeps seeing, the bloody dagger, and then he sees the ghost of Banquo, so on and so forth. So these are important aspects. Um, but at the same time, even these little elements, so there is a king who has supernatural powers, then there is Lady Macbeth, who may or may not be a witch. So the supernatural powers sort of push you towards recognizing, um like how much of the tragedy in the play that takes place is because of Macbeth's own doing, and how much of it is out of his control, how much of it is done by supernatural powers, which can be in the form of fate, or which can be in the form of witchcraft, and so on and so forth. Okay, now I am going to talk about Act 5. There is really you know it's basically a culmination of everything that is happening, which is you can predict that, yes, in the end Macbeth dies. I will just tell you how this whole thing happens. But besides the fact that Macbeth dies, there's something very important that happens in this scene, which I will talk about now. But before that, I just want to let you guys know that after I finish the summary, I will I will switch over and look at the Q&A, and I will be answering some of the questions. Okay, so I will answer the questions till, let's say, 11:05 a.m., and then I will continue with the character analysis of Macbeth. And I think we have Macbeth, and we'll talk about Lady Macbeth and Macbeth if we have enough time, and then we will, if we still have time, we will go back to the Q&A. Okay, but if I'm not able to do another Q&A at the end of this session, don't worry, we will do like a longer Q&A by, let's say, for the next class. Sadly, we don't have 6 hours for this. We only have 4, so I am rushing a little bit, but I hope that's okay. You will. I hope that you will get the PPT. I will send you the PPT at some point. Okay. Now, Act 5, scene 1 to 4. This is a pretty big act. I think there are 9 scenes in this, so that's a very, very big act. First scene, or the first few scenes, is Lady Macbeth. Now she is kind of, she has had a complete mental breakdown. Okay, she is suffering from psychological disorder. She is suffering from obsessive compulsive disorder, where she is, where she sees, like, hand blood in her hands, and she's constantly, washing her hands like that. And she is sleepwalking, and she sort of keeps seeing images of, all the murders not she has committed, but which she has instigated, which she has facilitated. So she sees, she keeps thinking about the murders of Duncan. She thinks about the murders of Banquo and Lady Macduff, and she keeps talking in fragments, and she keeps thinking about these murders, and she keeps talking about them. Okay, and this is, so basically she's gone mad. She's talking to herself, and her madness is sort of observed by a doctor and her lady in waiting. Her lady in waiting means her first maid, or her main chambermaid. Now, there are 4 lords, okay, or 4 thanes, as we have been calling them, which would be Lennox, Menteith, Angus, and Katniss. You don't need to remember these names. They basically joined Malcolm. Macduff has already joined Malcolm, and the English forces, because the English forces are supporting Malcolm, and they all decide that, okay, you know what, we are going to go and we are going to get the crown back from Macbeth. That Macbeth does not have the right to rule Scotland, and we will take the crown back. So they are essentially called the Rebel Army. They're simply called the Rebel Army because they are rebelling against the current king, who is Macbeth, right? So his messengers come and tell him that, okay, armies from the south. I'm saying armies from the south because Scotland is in the north and England is in the south, and it's basically an island. So Scotland on top, England in the bottom, and on this side, on you can say on the right, on the left side or the right side, you have Wales, and then there's a different island altogether, smaller one, which is Ireland. So for those who are not familiar with the UK geography, just Google it and look at the map of the UK. Now, so he's told that armies from the south is approaching, armies from England is approaching, so you must do something. And Macbeth is extremely super confident. So here comes his hubris. Okay, so we've already talked about, of course, we know that his fatal flaw is his ambition. Okay, that his fatal flaw is that, even though he feels sorry, his tragic flaw, even though he feels guilty that he's killing all these people, he still does it. So basically he lets his ambition, his greed for power take over his better sensibilities, that he should not kill another human being. So that the power of his ambition, the greed for power, is his tragic flaw. And here we also see hubris coming in, which means pride over confidence. Okay, and he sort of just dismisses it. He says, I don't care, like, I know the prophecies clearly mean that I cannot die. Okay, uh, and so on the other hand, then the scene shifts. We see that the army has reached Binham Wood. Remember, Binham Wood is the forest which is near where where Macbeth is staying, and he's staying in Dunsinane, and they have already reached Birhamwood. Now, now Malcolm, who is a very good leader, what he says is, just cut the branches of the trees and hold them in front of you to camouflage yourself, so that they cannot see that we are coming. Okay, so hold that in front of yourself. All right, and so that we can just approach, so that they don't know how big our army is. So they cut the trees, they cut the branches of the trees and sort of cover them, and to pretend to sort of hide how many they are in number. Okay, now just as Macbeth is about to enter the battle, because of course he has to fight, I mean, if the army is coming, there's an offstage shriek or offstage shout. Offstage money basically does not take place on the stage, like you don't see it, but you hear it, like you hear it in the back. Okay, and we are told that the queen is dead. We don't know that if she killed herself or whatever happened, but we can pretty much make an educated guess or assume that she killed herself, like it was a suicide. Now, and then suddenly a messenger comes and he says that, oh, Birnam Wood is moving towards Dunsinane. And why does he say it? Because remember, I just said that Malcolm has cut the branches from the trees and they're holding the trees in front, like the branches in front of him, to camouflage them. So in that way, Birnam Wood starts moving towards Dunsinane. Okay, get it? Like what happens? Because they're carrying the branches from the trees closer to Dunsinane, that becomes the way that Birnam Wood is moving towards Dunsinane. And now, Macbeth is furious, and he's at the same time he's very scared, because the prophecy of the witch is coming true, that Macbeth can only be defeated if Birnam Wood moves towards Dunsinane, and this is what is happening. And now Malcolm and his troops, they reach Dunsinane, and then under the cover of the branches, and this shows that the prophecy has come true. Birnam Wood has come to Dunsinane. Finally, Macbeth's forces, they surrender the castle, because there are too many. There are too many people fighting. The rebel army is really big, and in the end, like in a very climactic scene, okay, Macbeth and Macduff, they come face to face, and there is a sword fight which takes place, and Malcolm is proclaimed by all the assemblies that he's going to be the new king of Scotland, because Macbeth is killed. Okay, now if you remember the second prophecy, okay, the second apparition we talked about in the time when Macbeth visits the three witches the second time. The second one was a bloody child who said that he cannot be killed by a man who's born from a woman. So how does he die? How can Macbeth, how can Macduff kill him? Um, it happens because Macduff had was not born as a natural birth. Okay, he was born as a cesarean. All right. So this sort of complicates the idea that, of course, he is still born out of woman. So the witches were not very clear in the way they were giving interpretations of the prophecy. They said, oh, you can't be killed of a woman born. But what they basically meant was that you can be killed by somebody who was born out of a cesarean birth, and that's how Macduff was born. Okay. Now, we have covered all of this. We are now going to look at. I'm going to look at some of the questions here, um, and I will not be answering questions which are not related to the text. So don't ask me that. If there is anything specific, Mohit. Okay, Mohit's question. Uh, oh, I missed his question. Where did it go? In the beginning, I could relate Macbeth with Achilles from Troy. Yes, that's a good connection. He is a very brave warrior. That is true, but he doesn't really go on a killing spree as like Achilles doesn't really go on a killing spree, or like at least killing his own king and so on and so forth. Um, what is this? I am sorry, I actually missed some. I think it was Mohit only. Mohit, you had a question about Macbeth, something about, it was a pretty big question. I could not see it. Can you just copy paste it and just send it to me again? I'm sorry, I sort of dismissed it, trying to dismiss a different question. Is Lady Macbeth a victim, as she seems like a villain in the play? She is. It's a good question. She's not really a victim, but she is not. And she's kind of a villain, but she's not entirely a victim either. Okay, like she's a victim who does, a villain who does get eventually punished for her actions, if that makes sense. Okay. Now let me see if there's. Oh wait, I have Mohit's question. Sorry, I was expecting that Macbeth would kill Banquo and his son, and Macbeth's son will be the king, and then he will get to know that his son is actually Banquo's offspring. No, this is not some case series. Okay, that does not happen. So anyway, any other questions? Yes, ma'am. You can see the sky. Yeah, what is the point of asking me what is the marking scheme of British poetry and drama? Like, how is that? Is this connected to the class? What was the reaction of the Macbeth when he came to know about the end of his wife? Macbeth was not really sad. He was when Macbeth found out that Lady Macbeth is dead, he didn't really care. He was just, oh, okay, she died. That's it. This sort of shows that the relationship has deteriorated over the course of the play, because initially in the beginning they were very close to each other. That time also cesarean birth happened. Apparently it did. Like, that is, I don't know. I was not there 400 years ago, so it's kind of a really pointless question to ask me. Okay. What happens to the third prophecy? Fleance, son of Banquo, is seen nowhere in the end. Exactly. I was also thinking about this, Ankit, that what really happens with Fleance, because we don't see him and we don't know what happens to him. We just know that he has escaped, and Malcolm becomes the king anyway. So it could be possible that Fleance ends up marrying somebody, and they have a daughter, and that daughter marries Malcolm's son, and then somehow they have a grandson, and therefore eventually, technically, even Banquo's line sort of becomes a part of the royal lineage Okay, so this is a very interesting question, and I don't understand why this was brought up, and like why was it not Malcolm's killed children becoming the heir? Why was that not a prophecy? Why was this a prophecy? It could also be that, to be honest, that there are debates that there are arguments that the queen, sorry, that the three witches, they are not, um, that they're not exactly like legitimate or true witches. Like they're just manipulative women, and then they just come and say whatever they want. Like they're not actually prophesizing anything, they're just making things up. Okay. uh, so so that's another thing to keep in mind, that they might have just said it like that and it didn't really mean anything. So why Malcolm proclaimed as a king? Because witches said. Yeah, so as I said, Kiran, Malcolm was proclaimed as the king because in the first act, uh, King Duncan, before he was killed, he had already proclaimed that his son would be king. And the reason why Malcolm did not become king after King Duncan was killed was because Malcolm ran away to England. And therefore, Macbeth became king. But actually, the title of the king should have gone to um, Malcolm because of the law of primogeniture, which I explained. Okay, the name of Duncan's son was, yeah, yeah, Donald Ben. Thank you, Donald Ben. And I don't see any more questions. Okay, no more questions. Uh, I will be continuing now with the other with the character of Macbeth and the character sketch of Lady Macbeth. So we still have, I would say, how many slides? 10 more slides to go. So, if you guys want a break, I don't know, can you just type in the chat if you want a 5-minute break or something like that, or should I continue? I can give you like a 2-3 minute break if you want that. Just tell me in the chat if you want that, like in the Q&A. Okay, no. I'm assuming no, because it doesn't take that long to type a yes. Right. So you guys can still see the I'm assuming that you can still see. Okay, I'm getting some. Okay, some people are asking me to continue. Some people are asking me to stop. I will just answer this one question by this anonymous person. In the meantime, you can, like, those who want to go get a drink can go get a drink. I will be looking at this slide, so you will understand most of it if you even miss something in the beginning. So if you want to go get yourself a glass of water or something, you can go. Anonymous, to what extent Lady Macbeth is to blame for her husband's downfall? She is to blame until some extent, but not entirely, and I will talk about it. But good question. Good question. It's good to see that you're all thinking, uh, in the same direction. All right. Right. So first things first, character analysis. Macbeth, put in very simply, he is a man of noble birth. His father was the Thane of Glamis. Why is it important that he's a man of noble birth? Because it is only when you're a man of noble birth and then you have a downfall, that is the only time when your downfall becomes more significant if you're a man of noble birth. All right. Now, second thing, what is his tragic flaw? Of course, his tragic flaw is ambition. He is extremely ambitious. He wants to be the king of king of Scotland. You can argue that, well, that is not ambition. That is a greed for power. That is a desire for power. There's a desire for control, a power for supremacy. Yes, that all sort of fits in, but then it is essentially all ambition. It is ambition to be the king. It is ambition to have power. It is ambition to be supreme ruler. Okay, so it sort of all comes under the umbrella of ambition, right? Now, next we have freedom to act. Freedom to act in the sense that, keep in mind that that the tragic hero even though there are external forces that might influence him, that might trigger him to do something, right? For example, to give you an example, like, but they said that thane of Cawdor to wo banega aur to wo ban gaya, wo kaise pata chala un logon ko? uh, well, do keep in mind that the witches knew that there was a battle going on. They probably already knew that, there is that it's most likely that this is a very obvious thing that agar Thane of Cawdor अगर traitor निकला तो and Macbeth अगर उनका best soldier है तो उसी को ही बनाएंगे. ठीक है, this is just what I would call an educated guess. This is not prophesizing really. So so in a way you can say that the witches just made clever guesses, and they made comments which could be, you know which may not have been true. They just said it because they thought that this would instigate Macbeth to make those things come true. Okay, that is one argument. On the other hand, you can argue that no, what the witches said, the prophecy and everything, that was already written by the fates, that was already decided, and therefore it happened. So I am just leaving it out to you. It's up to you how you want to interpret it. Do you want to say that all of this was fate, that this was already decided, and all the witches were doing was just telling Macbeth, you do that? If you want to say that the witches were not really prophesizing, there is no such thing as fate, and just because the witches said these things, this is what instigated Macbeth to commit the crime, to kill King Duncan, to commit regicide, and therefore the so-called prophecy came for. You can do that. Okay. Now I hope this is clear. We will touch upon the role of fate in the next in the next in the next lecture, just to make it more clear, just to probably touch upon this again. But I am really hoping that you get what I'm saying at this point right now. All right. Now there is a fall from grace. Fall from grace basically happens when you know when fall from grace basically happens when the tragic hero, he does something bad, he has a tragic flaw, he acts on his tragic flaw, and that leads to a fall from grace. Now again, just like